Hello, welcome to tonight's Travel Talk, the Kingdom of the Netherlands with Dr. Dave Stone, College of Agricultural Sciences, Associate Dean of International Programs. The OSU Alumni Association online Travel Talk series is our way of connecting the people of OSU and the places we go with our travel program. Welcome. For those of you that are joining us for the first time tonight, check out the recordings online of some of our other travel talks at 4oregonstate.org/travel talks. On Tuesday, February 27th, to tell you about some upcoming talks, I'm partnering with the College of Health and their new Our Health and series in a town hall forum to answer your questions about sustainable travel. And we will also continue to have more travel talk presentations throughout the winter and into the spring. Another one I'm working on, which I don't have the date nailed down quite yet, but I believe it'll be in March, and it'll be on photography and how to take your great travel photos. So stay tuned for those and some more coming up in the future. Now, if there are any veteran alumni group travelers here in the audience, feel free to say hello, type your name in chat, and say hi to other folks in the room if you'd like to, and tell everyone where you've been. It's always great to hear from other travelers. And another place that you can reach out to fellow travelers is on our Facebook page. Of course, we're on Facebook. We don't post there all the time, but our other travelers talk to each other on that page, so you can check it out there as well. Now, for tonight's talk, I get my slide to move. Jumped ahead. For tonight's talk, we have invited our partners at the College of Agricultural Sciences to share with us information on innovative solutions for agriculture in the Netherlands. The college will be traveling there this spring with the Dean Staci, Simonich, on an exclusive tour, learning about greenhouse cultivation, seed production, and dairy operations, all the while savoring traditional and modern Dutch cuisine, and of course, being immersed in art, windmills, and tulips. You can't go there without seeing a tulip. Tonight, Dr. Dave Stone, he will talk to us about this trip, and he'll also teach you all about those new innovations in the Netherlands. Welcome, Dr. Stone. Come on, join us.
Hey, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for spending time with me today to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. Two things that are is that the Netherlands and agriculture. And I'd also like to thank the Oregon State University Alumni Association for hosting this. Some of those talks you just mentioned, Kate, about photography and sustainable tourism, I'm going to put those on my calendar as well. Those sound amazing.
Great. Well, during the talk tonight, before you get going, just to let our folks know that if you have any questions, you're welcome to use the chat. And thank you, Jay. Jay posted in chat already that he's went to Cuba. Anybody else, you're welcome to put your questions that you have for Dr. Stone in chat, or there's also that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can use that as well. Either one, your choice. I'll be here to help monitoring the questions, and I might pop in and out and ask a couple of them to Dr. Stone during the talk, but we'll reserve time at the end for sure for all of your questions. So don't be shy, type your questions in. Now we will officially hand it off to you, and you can teach us all about these really great things in the Netherlands.
Great, thank you again. So I apologize to advance to anyone here that is Dutch. There's going to be some Dutch words that appear, and I'm going to mispronounce them. I've been there about a half dozen times now, and it's been one of the more difficult languages for me to tackle. So my apologies in advance, but we'll get through this together. So the title is The Kingdom of the Netherlands, Agricultural Innovations and Culture for the World. And I think you'll see a lot of examples of this. And if you've been there, you understand what a special place it is already. So next slide, Kate. So a little bit about me before we begin. I'm a toxicologist and a food scientist by training, actually. Right now, I'm an associate dean for international programs within the College of Agricultural Sciences. And I'll talk about the college in a little bit here. But my roots go back to OSU for quite a while. I did my doctoral training at OSU. You could see there a friendlier Benny the Beaver mascot. That's what it was on the football helmets when I was a student. And of course, we've evolved to the current mascot. And I've had several roles at OSU. I've led a food innovation center recently up in the Portland metro area. I've led a National Pesticide Information Center, which is a unique service to the nation about health and pesticides and the environment. I'm also part of OSU's extension services. So I'm deeply rooted throughout a lot of the programs at the university. And as of this year, I've started leading a student faculty-led program abroad in Ecuador, which goes to the Galapagos and to different parts of mainland Ecuador, where we took 16, 17 students last year to look at food and sustainable ag practices in the remarkable country of Ecuador as well. Next slide, please. So this program that I'm going to talk about is being led by the College of Agricultural Sciences. We're the founding college at OSU. Since 1868, we have served as an engine that drives innovation, supports industry, and offers education opportunity for anyone to grow their fullest potential. And we encourage everyone on this call to grow with us. And a way that you can do that is, there's many ways you can do that. And one way is to be part of this trip. And you also notice there Dean Staci Simonich. Not only is she our fantastic leader and such an accomplished scientist, but she's actually really fun and really caring. And I think you'd enjoy traveling with her. And she'll be part of this trip, of course, as well. We are calling it the Dean's Trip. Next slide, please. And so this is one of the mailers that were sent out about the Dean's Trip. You've got to highlight the tulips. We are strategically going there in April because that is the height of tulip season, along with many other attributes that happen in April that make it a very good destination. And so the dates are, the program would actually start the evening of April 14th and go through the evening of the 19th. We're encouraging folks to either show up early and travel on their own and explore other parts of the Netherlands or nearby countries. It's very centrally located, part of Europe, or stay longer. But the actual program dates themselves will begin on the evening of the 14th and conclude on the 19th. Next slide. So here we are. This is where the Netherlands is in red. You can see, again, it's got a very central location to northern, but also central Europe. And that's part of the magic of why it's had such success in agriculture, we'll talk about. So demographically, it's just short of 18 million people. It's about 16,000 square miles. And so this is much smaller than Oregon. You could fit several Netherlands in Oregon. I think maybe up to 7 Netherlands would fit in Oregon. So you can do the math there and understand that this is one of the most densely populated places in Europe. And probably in the planet. And a lot of it, almost a quarter of the land is actually below sea level. One of the areas that we'll visit, Friesland, actually almost all of it is below sea level. And so they've been historically masters at water engineering and keeping that land from flooding. And it's not always been successful in the past. They've had a series of very devastating floods up until 1953, a big one. And that's really influenced the way they look at engineering and safety in their investments. You can see the Dutch flag there and the red, white, and blue of the Netherlands flag. And as a quick story, personal story with me and that flag, we're a soccer family in the Stone family. And in 2019, we went to France to see the Women's World Cup. And the finals was the Netherlands versus the US. And so we bought a bunch of US face tattoos for my kids, and we put them on their face, and they were the red, white, and blue that you see up there. And so on the train to the game, we had Dutch fans tell us that despite our American flags, we'd actually put the Dutch flag on our faces. And so we thought that was pretty funny, made new friends through putting the red, white, and blue of the Dutch flag on our cheeks. If you could hit the button again, I want to highlight something on this slide. So most people are confused, or many people are confused of Holland versus Netherlands. How do I refer to it? And it's really the Netherlands. There's 12 provinces in the Netherlands. 2 of them are are called Holland, North Holland and South Holland, which have the blue stars in this picture. And they're where the three major cities are. And of course, the most famous one being Amsterdam, but also Den Haag, or The Hague, which is the administrative capital. Also, the international war crimes tribunals happen in this city. And then also Rotterdam with its famous deepwater port. Next slide, please. So these are the things that we all think of, I think, when we think of the Netherlands, or specifically parts of Holland in the Netherlands. We think of biking. It's got one of the highest, if not the highest, bikes per capita in the world. Windmill and tulips, the wooden shoes, the narrow houses, and then the Dutch masters, right? Vermeer, Van Gogh, Rembrandt, and many more. But the classic Dutch masters that they're so famous for. But there's more to it, and of course, these will be part of the tour that we're going to do. We'd be remiss to not include all of this. But there's something else that's really special from my point of view about the Netherlands. And if you could go to the next slide, Kate, I'll share what that is. Actually, I'm going to share what that is in a little bit. So we're going to do a little bit more brief history first. But no surprise, it's their agriculture. So the Dutch have a big, long history. I'm going to distill it embarrassingly into a slide, and then another slide that kind of captures more modern history. But of course, if you're a historian, there's a lot of details here. I'm just going to blow through. But this area has been settled for a very long time. People for thousands of years have lived by the river deltas of the North Sea. And that was a pretty dangerous place to live because, again, a lot of flooding. And you can go back in history and see just thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that would die during these big flood events. And it's kind of interesting, this part of the Europe was actually for a very long time a militarized border for the Roman Empire. So on one side was the Germanic tribes that would fight against the Roman Empire for decades. And then the other side was kind of the northern front of the Roman Empire. The man I've got pictured here is William the Orange, who helped spark the 80 Years' War against the Habsburgs. And that was kind of the first time that this area became independent from Spain in 1648. And so William the Orange is considered the father of the Netherlands. And to this day, the Dutch national team wears orange, and orange is a really favorite color there because of this. Like many parts of Western Europe, it's got a complicated history that includes colonialism. And so the Dutch were colonialists in many parts of the world, and I would say most notably what it is today, Indonesia and South Africa. If you look at the restaurants in Amsterdam, you see this legacy still with a very high amount of Indonesian restaurants, Indonesian culture that is still quite active in the Netherlands. The current borders were founded in 1815 after the defeat of Napoleon. Next slide. And so now we're some interesting facts about the Dutch. If you look at the 10 tallest countries in the world, the Netherlands is the tallest. And you can see there that Europe is represented throughout the top 10, but the Netherlands is the tallest, and will actually be in one part of the Netherlands where they're even taller. And so the tallest people of the world. And when I visited, I spent a lot of time looking up. The symbol in the middle may be recognizable to some of you, but it's the Dutch East Indies Company symbol. And this was the first stock traded company in the world. It was a bunch of Dutch investors that shipping merchants that invested in the company and formed kind of what became the modern stock traded corporate structure that the world has adopted. And so the Dutch have long been traders. They've long been transactional. The whole tulip markets and tulip mania, if you know that story. So a lot of their wealth and a lot of their history has been based on water, trade, and trading. And then because I'm in food science, I couldn't help but include gin. Gin is a product of the Dutch, and they make very good varieties of gin as well. Next slide. So getting more towards agriculture and how did this come about, and why am I including a slide about World War II? Well, remarkably, the Netherlands were neutral and not really involved in World War I, despite major fighting going on next door in Belgium and France and Germany, of course. But that wasn't the case in World War II. In the very early days of World War II, the German Luftwaffe Air Force surprise attacked and leveled downtown Rotterdam. This had not really happened before, and was just obliterated. And many residents were relocated to Amsterdam. The Germans threatened to do it to the very historic town of Utrecht next, and so the Dutch surrendered after putting up some fierce resistance, but couldn't deal with the Air Force and how the Germans were leveling their cities. And so this set up a kind of back and forth for control of the deepwater port in Rotterdam, which was a major objective of the Allies. And then if you know the story of World War II, you probably know the story of Arnhem and Nijmegen, which is the last German victory on a series of failed attempts to take the bridges in the surprise attack of the Allies, which was made famous in the movies, the movie that Sean Connery's in. The name is escaping me now, about trying to take the bridges of Arnhem. So a lot of the houseboats that you see today in in Amsterdam, actually go back to that period where people were relocated from Rotterdam to live on the boats. But as a consequence also of the fierce Dutch resistance to occupation, they were subjected to a famine, and over 20,000 Dutch citizens died during this, and was a tragedy for them, of course. And so since that time, their government had pledged to invest in the agricultural sector through subsidies, through rural infrastructure, and through industrialization. And it pledged to grow twice as much food with half as many resources. And that motivation and that support and the structure they put in place, I think, is alive and well today in what you see in the remarkable innovations that they have in their agricultural sector. Next slide, please. Okay, so why the Netherlands and agriculture? This is the first Dean's trip that we've put together for the College of Ag Sciences, and it was pretty readily apparent, at least to me, that this was a place we wanted to really showcase and to focus on for some of the most innovative practices around the world. The other thing I'll say about the Netherlands is it's relatively small. The infrastructure for transport is fantastic. It's a safe, peaceful democracy, and it's really lovely people. So all those things together made it a really good place for us to really focus on for this first trip. Next slide. So last year, which timed out really well for us to start to think about this trip, a lot of press happened around what was going on in the Netherlands. And so I wanted to highlight two articles here, one from the Washington Post called "Cutting Edge Tech Made This Tiny Country a Major Exporter of Food." And actually, some of the places that are in that article are places that we'll visit. And it really kind of showcased, how a small country really positioned itself to be a major player in both production and export of food. And then similarly, the National Geographic had an article entitled "This Tiny Country Feeds the World." Very similar stories about how in a small footprint, they're able to really be such a major player in this space. Next slide. Here's just some data. They're only second to us, to the US, as far as the biggest agricultural food exporter in the world. Not necessarily producer, right? We're still talking about a small country that's not the size of China or Brazil or Russia or the US, but as far as exports, a major driver. And you can see here that flowers, dairy and eggs, ag technology, which will be another focus of this trip, meat and vegetables are huge exports from the Netherlands. And this is pre-COVID data here. So 2017, 101 billion euros of value that get exported from the Netherlands. They're feeding much of Europe, but they're feeding beyond Europe as well. Next slide. So I talked a lot about export, but they're also the world's biggest producers of tomatoes, of green peppers, and cucumbers. The significant portion of their exports consist of things that you're familiar with, and that's the bulbs, the flower bulbs, right? The flat, but also fresh cut plants, flowers. The bulb is the value. It's not the cut flower on what gets traded throughout the world. And there's a place that we'll visit on this trip that talks about what goes into making a commercially viable tulip bulb. And it's about a 20-year process. It's really a remarkable story of all that goes into getting a bulb onto the market. Next slide. Part of what the Dutch have had to do, because they have they're not a large country and land there is incredibly expensive for a hectare of land, is that they've really accelerated mechanization and labor. And so the picture you're looking at there is actually a robot that drives down these large fields and zaps weeds with lasers. So it can identify what's a crop and what's a weed. And it's just all driven remotely by someone else that's not doesn't even have to be nearby, and they just roam these fields in what really is like science fiction. So it's a very highly mechanized agricultural sector, and it's very strongly focused today on international exports. They're only a population of 18 million. And so they've really invested a lot in being a profitable sector. And so, of course, they've turned to exports. If you look at the numbers, the agriculture in the Netherlands only employs about 4% of the entire Dutch labor force. In fact, a lot of that now is labor from Eastern Europe with the larger EU mobility of work permits. But out of that 4% labor force, they account for about a fifth of the total export value that comes out of the Netherlands. And they have very large sectors in banking, in technology, in other very high value, profitable industries. And again, a lot of this gets back to land is incredibly expensive. If you talk to farmers there, to get into farming is very difficult and challenging today. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. And so what about the Dutch and water? Of course, water is of huge importance to this area of the world where a quarter of it is below sea level. One of the sites I visited, they're about 3 meters below sea level. And so they need these systems in place, of course, for storm surges and other events. The picture in the upper right is just an incredible waterworks. I've never seen this. It's in the Zeeland region of the Netherlands towards the south. There's just these incredible structural engineering feats that they put on that are really just modern marvels. And it's on my list to see these. It won't be part of this tour, but again, we're encouraging people to spend time on either end of the trip and really get to know this country. The canal systems that are throughout the Netherlands are famous for just all sorts of size barges that ship goods. And then the picture of the port there, that's Rotterdam. This is the one of the, I think maybe the second largest port in the world after Singapore, and just an enormous deep water port and a real asset to the country and a real reason why it is so successful at export. Of course, they import through this as well. The facilities there are second to none, and it's really quite the story of how they developed this port over time. Next slide. So what about the trip itself? So on the arrival day, many folks that will be flying with us will probably choose, if they're coming out of Portland at least, there is a nonstop Delta flight. Leaves about 2 in the afternoon, arrives about 9 in the morning. The next day, we lose about 9 hours of time zone change in Amsterdam. And it's nice. It's a nonstop flight, really enjoyable flight. And the first day is a lazy arrival day. People need to adjust, but one of the activities that we'd like to take people on is right next to Schiphol, the Amsterdam airport, is this area, and this is where my Dutch is going to be really embarrassing, called Zaanse Schans, where they have a series of about 7 different windmills that are all working. And they date back to the 17th and 18th century. And the cool thing about this area is they all serve different functions. Some of them were for logging, some of them are for energy production. And so they're all different looking windmills, and I learned so much about just the role of windmills in different industries through this. But it's also a quaint village, and it also has the first Albert Heijn, which is their massive grocery store chain. The first one ever is there as well that you can tour around. So to me, it's a really nice way to just jump into Dutch culture. It's very close to the airport, and it'd be on the way to taking folks to the first location and hotel in Delft, which if you've been to that town, you know it's one of the cutest places on the planet. So that's the arrival day. Next slide. Delft is, again, a very historic town. This is the town that Vermeer, the artist, was raised in. So you see that in many of his paintings of just the impact that this gorgeous city had on him. The hotel that will be staying up there is a historic Hotel Arsenal. It's definitely a quintessential part of the cityscape of Delft. It's a 16th century complex. Again, that is just part of Vermeer's works, and just really, I can't say enough about just how charming that this town is. The aerial view there I took from the hotel, the new church. It's called the new church, where a lot of Dutch royalty is buried. And by new, it was built in the 16th century as well. So the old church, which you can also tour, is really old. But this just gives you one view of kind of what the city looks like. And again, being a small, well-connected place, this is just really an hour from Amsterdam. Next slide. Beyond being the home of Vermeer, the other things that Delft are famous for is the Delft, the blue and white plateware. And so you've probably seen this in many places. It's hard to not find a store that's selling different styles of these, whether it's a Christmas ornament or a mug or the plates themselves, all sorts of ways that they've really capitalized on this feature of the city. There's a steeple from the new church down at the end of that canal. So many streets that look like that. There's a cheese market selling the famous Gouda, or I think a lot of people refer to it as Gouda here, on the city markets, and they have all sorts of kinds there. Some infused with cumin, some with basil, salt flakes embedded in over time that have aged and really make just a remarkable flavor. And then there's William the Orange buried there in the new church. And so again, a lot of Dutch royalty end up being interned in the churches in Delft. And so there's been free time built in to explore this charming, quaint little town as well. Next slide. So then we start with really looking at what makes this place such a remarkable, innovative place of agriculture. And there's a region called Westland that's where a lot of the greenhouses exist in the Netherlands. And I don't know of another place on the planet where there's this much density of greenhouses and the different activity that they're doing there. And so the tour really starts with a visit to the World Horti Center, where they look at different ways of showcasing Dutch horticulture and what it does for the economy and their investments and attracting foreign investment, direct investment into that sector. And so it's a really good way to get a sense of how the country has really enabled and supported this sector and what they're doing as a country. On either side of that slide are the research greenhouses at Wageningen University, the top ag university in the world, which we have a strong relationship with at OSU. Their research center around greenhouses and the different work that they're doing in pest control inside greenhouses, or hydroponics, or the different technologies that they're applying and working with the private sector to showcase production in these greenhouses. Next slide. If you've ever flown in to Schiphol Airport, you may have looked out your window, depending on how you've flown in, and seen bright lights reflecting back. And this is an aerial of that Westland region. Those bright lights are sunshine reflecting back off the glass houses or greenhouses. And this is just one section of it, but it gives you a sense of how much massive investment that they've made in production that they have in the greenhouse facilities there. And again, I've never seen anything like it. If you drive down some of these roads, it's just endless, the amount of greenhouse capacity that they have. Next slide. So after we explore and spend a day talking to businesses and startups and the research that's going on around greenhouses and the associated industries that support greenhouses, the next day is spent going out to Wageningen University, out by the town of Wageningen. And this is about an hour's drive. So for Dutch standards, considered quite a ways away. For Oregon standards, not so bad. To the university itself. And so several pictures there. One is of the students. So we have an active student exchange program. And those are Dutch students and OSU students around the table with me when I visited last April. And we'll do the same thing. We'll have lunch with Dutch and OSU students and treat them to, or have them show some Dutch food that they love for us. There's a picture of the library on the other side of that at Wageningen University. And again, this is for the past 23 years been rated on world rankings, the #1 agricultural university in the world. It is incredibly high caliber research that happens there, incredibly high caliber teaching, and it's a really neat campus. In the middle there, I have something called the Unilever Hive, Unilever being, of course, the very large Dutch company. And they have a building there, and there's 3 more just like it from other private sector industries where they've co-located with Wageningen, and they have the students working there. They work with the professors, and throughout that is just a really amazing private sector academic relationship that I'll be very, very excited to tour and showcase. Next slide will show you the second part of that day is going out to one of their field sites in a town called Randwijk, where they're actually doing a lot of work on robotics and a lot of work on agrivoltaics. And so you can see the slide here with the photovoltaic panels. These are pear orchards that are being covered by solar rays, and they're doing studies on how to maximize shade and sunlight by tilting the panels, but also maximizing energy production. So co-locating energy production and agricultural production in the same space. And then this robotics demonstration here was one of their engineering ag faculty had developed a pruner that was specific to pear trees and how to prune and then gently take a pear off of a branch and into a basket, essentially. And so, again, advancing in this space. And we've got a faculty connection in both of these through both of our College of Ag and our College of Engineering with both of the professors that gave me demonstrations in the agrivoltaics and the robotics. So again, cutting edge research happening there and really, really interesting work. Next slide, please. And so after Wageningen, then we do some more touring around Delft and looking at some of the private sector industries in the area. But the second half of that day 4 is going to be a visit to probably one of the most remarkable things I've seen in my life, and that's the Keukenhof tulip gardens. So for about 2 months out of the year, this place looks like these pictures here, and it's massive. And it's really hard to describe without just being there. And so we'll carve out the afternoon to spend in Keukenhof to look at not only the landscapes that they've put together here and the different varieties of tulips and the fields around it, where you can rent a bike and bike through these nearby fields, or truly you can spend just 3 hours in the gardens itself, because again, they're highly diverse on how they put these walking paths together. And if you can go to the next slide, what I really want to highlight, which I thought was surprising and really wonderful about Keukenhof, is also how educational it is. There's about 7 pavilions throughout the grounds, And each one of them tells a different story of the tulip or floriculture or horticulture and its impact on different aspects of society, on art, on the science that it takes to get a bulb into production. And so the pavilions alone are just really world class, very educational, and just a nice addition to just not only touring the grounds, but actually learning so much about this industry and the impact it's had on history and society and economies. Next slide, please. So now we've migrated from Delft to the second location that we'll be staying in, and that's Amsterdam, famous Amsterdam. We'll be staying at the Tivoli Hotel. If you've ever been to the Tivoli, you know its history. It's one of the oldest continuously operated luxury properties in Amsterdam. It's really in the medieval neighborhood on the iconic River Amstel. And it's really a remarkable hotel. And I was very, very happy to hear that there was space here that we could book, because again, April's the very desirable month to be in the Netherlands. And so we have blocked off rooms here. It's really a Rembrandt inspired and of that period hotel that's really second to none. So very excited that will be the second location, again, in a very, very neat part of old historic Amsterdam. Next slide. Amsterdam is famous for many things, including its museums. And so we have the famous Rijksmuseum there, the two towers where you can see Rembrandt's Night Watch. We have the Van Gogh Museum up at the top there, and the collection there, probably the world's most recognizable artist, and just a remarkable collection, including many portraits that he did about agriculture, of course. The hay bales but other portraits as well. Really was quite a focus for him. The Anne Frank house down to the right, and in the center bottom there is actually in nearby Haarlem, but I couldn't help but put it in because it's a remarkable museum about science called the Tellers Museum, which is all devoted to scientific contraptions from the past, and really quite a remarkable museum that's literally like a 15-minute train ride away. So I wanted to make sure for the science historians to highlight that one if you get a chance to ever see it. And again, that's called Tellers. Next slide. So we can't talk about this trip without talking about food, of course. There's a lot of foodie things to do in Amsterdam itself. There's a lot of foodie things to do throughout the Netherlands, as there is across Europe, of course. But there is an Eating Europe tour that's historic. That is part of the Netherlands. So you can see there they have a lot of different meats and cheeses on these boards. And then they take you through the different food scenes that the Netherlands is famous for. There's the floating flower market, which also does have food. There's the seafood markets there. And then this is a picture of the original Heineken brewery that has now been subsumed by a larger one. But if you go on something called the Heineken Experience, you get to see the original kettles that they brewed in and go through the history of what was a very important major beer company that really did corner the world first, and the story that they did that, how they did that as well. Really, really cool experience. Next slide, please. So the next full day that we'll spend is going out to a part of a province of the Netherlands called Friesland. And if you've ever never heard of this area, I hadn't either until one of my more recent trips into the Netherlands, but it's actually got its own language. It's got its own flag, which you can see here with the 7 hearts. One of its claim to fame is the Holstein Friesland cow. I think there's also a Friesland horse. So it's got a long, long history of agriculture. Almost all of it is below sea level. But despite this, remember I mentioned the Netherlands is the tallest country in the world. Well, they're even taller in Friesland. And again, someone being 6'5", 6'6" is just normal there. Really remarkable. And they're also famous for their speed skaters. And so a lot of ice skating. If you follow the Winter Olympics, you know the Dutch do very well in the skating competition, and it's really famous for it. And I will just say, everyone I ever encounter, the Dutch are very, very laid back, very pleasant people, very serious people, but also very pleasant. And I would say the nicest people I met were in Friesland. Really just a really cool place to visit, and it's in a very strong agricultural roots. The largest town there is called Leeuwarden, and they're all really delightful canal-oriented towns. So what are we going to see in Friesland? Next slide. We're going to see dairy. And so Wageningen, the research university, has a station out there called their Wageningen Dairy Campus, where they walk through classic dairy production, but also all the innovations that are happening, the robotics in dairy, the sustainable practices that are happening with dairy. There's some changes happening now in the Netherlands, which I'll talk about the next slide. So they're trying to get ahead of these changes and more sustainable practices in their dairy sector. So next slide will show you actually the second dairy that we'll visit, which is actually a local dairy farmer, a gentleman that runs a dairy there and actually leaves part of the land in that not being produced to actually mitigate for some wildlife. But some policy things are happening in the Netherlands that will inevitably come up, and we want them to come up in this trip because they're impacting farming, and they're just some of the issues that we face here in the U.S. as well. And one of them is there's a lot of use of fertilizers in the Netherlands. You know, they're highly productive, and so the Dutch government has imposed brand new strict limits on nitrogen, and so it's really become quite a big issue around how to farm. It's actually led to some high-profile protests where the Dutch farmers got on their tractors and blocked major highways. And coupled with this, they're undergoing a very big energy transition. So they're moving to more electric powered everything. And that includes trying to get rural distribution onto farms, which hasn't always been smooth. And also coupled with the war in the Ukraine and the energy crisis that's happening around Europe, there's a lot of things happening that are unsettling to the traditional way that people have farmed and the farmers there. And so that's definitely something that we'll discuss and be exposed to on the trip as well. And I should mention this point too. One of the folks that'll be with us on this trip is a Dutch agribusiness consultant named John Smith, who is deeply involved with a lot of these issues and will definitely be, you know, kind of our conduit in having these conversations of how the Dutch balance a new future with old ways of producing dairy products with still having viable markets looking forward. Next slide. And so the final full day is going up into the Seed Valley. So after being in Friesland, we return back to Amsterdam. And then the next day, we go up to the Alkmaar region, where it's famous for kind of being the Seed Valley and the Green Valley of the Netherlands. And so we'll spend a morning at a place called Bijo Seeds, where they'll walk us through everything from A to Z about how a seed is produced, cleaned, certified, vigorous, cataloged, packaged, and sent out to the world. And there's a memory I have there of visiting their warehouse of seeds. And imagine the largest Amazon warehouse you've ever seen, just full of marked bags of seeds that are going to go around the world. It was remarkable. And you can see here a picture of the posts on the left-hand side there with QR codes on them. This is an example of a place I visited just outside of Bijo where it was a nursery that was massive, 6 employees, and what they're basically, one of them is doing is just moving around drones that scan these QR codes that give it information about when to water the plants or when to fertilize or when to do other activities. And so just again, this mechanization, the cost of labor, the tech innovation that they've had to do to compensate has really, really been remarkable. You can see here, this is a startup I visited in purple, but that's all right. We'll go to the next slide because food is definitely on my mind here. The desserts, the food, the cheeses, they're all remarkable. In the middle there is an Indonesian restaurant I visited. We have a fantastic Indonesian restaurant on the itinerary. Again, this goes back to the Dutch past. And they've really embraced Indonesian culture and Indonesian cuisine in the modern era of the Netherlands, and it was just fantastic. In the bottom there, with the Dutch flag is herring with pickles and onion, and there's a proper way to eat that, which if you're on this trip, I will show and demonstrate. And for those that are bold, but this is one of my favorite foods there as well. And then, of course, no discussion is complete without talking about cheese and the quality of cheese, the variety of cheese, the seriousness with which they take cheese in the Netherlands is almost next to none. And the desserts are amazing as well. It's not just about the stroopwafel; it's about many other desserts that the Dutch are famous for, and they do it all so well. Next slide. So I'll wrap up this presentation. Hopefully you learned a little bit about Dutch history, but also a lot about Dutch agriculture and food. But here's some key information. The program, again, starts on the evening of the 14th. It concludes on the evening of the 19th. Several folks will be flying in on the 13th. And again, we'll lose a day with the time zone difference. The provider is a very experienced provider based out of New York that's got a lot of activity in the Netherlands, but across Europe, called Arrangements Abroad. And so they'll be part of doing our end-to-end coordination. And when I say experience, I mean down to the level of they were very up to date with the current regulations around tour buses and how deep they can go into Delft and those kind of details that really matter when you're there. We'll also be joined, as I mentioned, by a man named John Smit, who's a many decades long Dutch agribusiness consultant, also a graduate of Wageningen, and also, just by coincidence, has operated a farm out by Silverton, Oregon, for many years in the past. A really neat guy and very eager to continue the relationship with Oregon and be part of this trip. And I just want to mention the deadline to register is coming up. We're going to lose one of the hotel blocks by December 19th. But we'll probably have some wiggle room if people want to join on after that. We know people need to make some decisions for different reasons on different timelines. But it is coming up, and we are starting to fill up, but we really do, if you're on this webinar and this is of interest to you, I really encourage you to reach out to me if you do have any questions, because we've really put together something I think that's going to be very highly unique. Next slide, please. And so again, here's some program information. I can get you more details. It's very prominently right now located on the front homepage of our website in the College of Ag Sciences at OSU. You can see here the cost per person, or if it's a single rate. This is including most of the things you would think it would include. It does not include the flight to get to the Netherlands or wherever you're going to arrive in Europe and back. But pretty much everything else while you're there. And so finally, just a few things to why April. I'll finish up here with that. Well, several reasons. One, strangely enough, it's actually the driest month in the Netherlands. April and May are the two driest months. Yes, it could be sprinkling that time of year, but it's also often quite sunny all day long and beautiful. Of course, it's the tulip season. We want to be there when people from around the world are there, but the tulips are going to be really showcased not only in Keukenhof and the fields that we drive through, but also in the industries we'll visit. So floriculture is huge there, of course. It's an easy way to get there. Delta, if you're coming from PDX, Delta offers it's one of our few remaining international nonstops. It's a rival to Schiphol Airport, which gets you through really quickly, and is obviously a very modern airport. And then if anyone wants, they can stay longer and celebrate King's Day. And I just want to highlight that one. That's on April 27th, where they celebrate the King's birthday. I haven't been, but from everything I can see from YouTube or talking to people, it is definitely one of Europe's largest parties. The Dutch really let loose during King's Day, and one day I will make a point to stay there for that. But the program itself will be ending. But again, there's so much to do in the region. We do encourage people to stick around. And so with that, I will say in English what this says in Dutch, and that is join us. This is my information here. And Kate, I think this is my time to take any questions we have.
Yes, it is. Okay, sorry, my internet was being a little unstable. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and pop those into Q&A. We did, Mark Whitney let us know, I don't know if you all happen to see it in the Q&A, but he added in reference to the World War II slide, the reenactment of the Battle of Arnhem during the Second World War was later lavishly remade into A Bridge Too Far, a 1977 movie.
Yes, that's the one I was trying to think of. Thank you very much. A Bridge Too Far, which is a blockbuster movie. Yes.
So thank you, Mark, for looking that up during the talk and adding that in to Q&A. So if you do have a question for us, go ahead and add it in. And note, if you use chat, there's a little blue button at the top that says you can put your note to everyone or just hosts and panelists. So if you want everyone to see your question, just make sure that little blue button says everyone and not just hosts and panelists. So Mitch, what I'm going to do is, you had a great comment, so I'm just going to put that down real quick for you. He was close in the area, so just wanted to do a quick comment there. And then I also want to say that we have Dean Simonich is with us today on this call. So she is here. If you have any questions for her, and I might be able to figure out if I can get your camera turned on. If you want to turn your camera on, you can send me a note in chat if you're in a spot that you can turn your camera on and might be able to say hi. I might be able to figure this out. But in the meantime, feel free to type in chat. Okay, it looks like December 5 also happens to be Nicholas's Eve. And no, I'm not going to try to say that Dutch word either. So thank you for adding that in. What good timing for our talk. We're on Nicholas's Eve tonight.
Sinterklaas, yes.
Yes. And I'll have to say, when you were talking about the innovation of the machine that laser points weeds, I am waiting for a handheld version that I can use in my own yard. So if the technology is out there, encourage them. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in.
We did have a comment about Delft. I think it was from Beth. Fell in love with Delft. I agree. I also would love to live there. And was just in Rotterdam. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Hopefully you saw that cool modern architecture of those houses in Rotterdam. Really neat place.
Yeah. Okay, we did. Jay wanted to know, are all accommodations in Amsterdam at the same property?
Yes, so we're only going to be in 2 hotels. We thought we would minimize the number of times people had to pack up. And yes, so it'll all be in Tivoli in Amsterdam, and it'll all be in Hotel Arsenal in Delft. So you're only having to pack your bags and move once.
Great. And then Dean Simonich, I don't know if you're able to say hi, but I did promote you to a panelist. So if you wanted to say hi and turn your camera on, you now have the power. And I think she's trying to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm relaxing at home watching this great talk and getting very excited about the trip. So I look a little more casual than I would normally, but my thanks to Dave for arranging this trip and putting together the presentation. I can't wait to go. Let's see, it's December. I have to wait until April. Looking forward to it.
Well, you look great and we put you on the spot. So, but thank you for popping in to say hi. Candy has a question about how much of the Netherlands ag technology has been adapted by agriculture in the United States.
Yeah, great question, Candy. I would say our technology is also very highly innovative. There's differences, of course, of what we focus on. There is so much of this technology is actually collaborative, multinational. Some of these companies that I mentioned, like Unilever, some of the seed companies, even they're collaborating. In fact, a lot of the Dutch, some Dutch seed grows here in Oregon because they just don't have the land space. So a good example is carrot seed in Central Oregon. So there's a lot of adoption back and forth. There's a lot of trade between the U.S. and the Netherlands, and I don't see that ending. Actually, I think they look much like the UK does. They look across the pond to us more so than many other places in Europe.
Great. And then Jay, remind us, how big is the group for this trip if folks are interested? In terms of capacity, how many people can you bring on?
Yeah, so we could bring on probably 4 more couples comfortably.
Great. So there's a little bit of space.
There is space, and the folks that are coming are wonderful people involved with different agricultural sectors that we'll showcase there. But I just want to emphasize they're wonderful people that are fun to travel with. Great.
And the total number is under 20, isn't it? It was a smaller group, a small intimate group. Yeah, so it's definitely a smaller intimate group of folks. It's a really one-on-one, great behind the scenes type of experience. And we're also going to put it on our website too, so you can be able to find it in multiple directions. And then in summary, you'll get all of the links and information post tour too. Great. Well, everyone says thank you. I don't think we have any more questions, so we can probably just go ahead and move on, unless there's any last words that you want to say prior to closing down for tonight.
Just again, thank you, Kate. Thank you to the Alumni Association. Thank you for everyone who participated. If the timing doesn't work out for you for this trip, or for other reasons you can't make it, and I hope you can, stay engaged with us. Again, grow with us. We really want to be a College of Ag that's engaged in so many different ways with the people of Oregon. So reach out one way or another. And again, thank you for spending the evening with us.
Yeah, and if you are ever on LinkedIn or any social media site, look for Staci's name, because she is always posting amazing things that this college is doing. So I personally follow her, and I love getting all the updates of what's happening within the college. So it's a really great resource. Another great resource for you all. So if you're looking for information on other trips, you can find some more that we offer through the Alumni Association, and they're all listed on our tour calendar at same4oregonstate.org/travel, and I will be posting this trip on here as well. So it's a one-stop shop. And then a couple just to highlight this spring, if you're interested in heading out, that we still have some space for. And if you logged on a little early, you saw some rotating slides, and those highlighted some of those trips. And again, Facebook, if you want to chat with others, it's a great place. So you're welcome to find us there. So you'll get copies of all this information in your email in the next few days. And so check that out, share the recording with friends, and we hope to see you all on tour at some time. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.